Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an extremely special event, really the 2024 presidential campaign process for the US Transhumanist Party has begun in earnest, and today we have our Presidential Candidate Roundtable. During the past month, two distinguished U.S. Transhumanist Party members, Tom Ross and Daniel Twedt, have put themselves forward in seeking the U.S. Transhumanist Party's endorsement to run for President of the United States. And this roundtable is part of the primary process. It is the opportunity for our members to ask the candidates questions about issues that they care about. Here is the format of the roundtable. We are going to have 5 minutes each for introductory remarks from the candidates, and then we will go to questions from our roundtable panelists, as well as questions from the audience. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question. We will have a cumulative time format, which means candidates do not lose the time for each segment if they do not use all of the time. Instead, that time carries over. But if candidates go over their allotted time, then that time will be subtracted from their subsequent remarks. So without further ado, we shall begin with introductory remarks from Daniel Twedt. We had a random number generator which selected Daniel to go first. So Daniel, you have the floor for introductory remarks.
Thanks so much, Gennady. Is my mic working? I had to rejigger the plug there for a second. So it is. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. You may have seen me before. I've been on the Virtual Enlightenment Salon a couple other occasions, and actually was an endorsed candidate here in Thousand Oaks, California, on my third try for the local city council seat. Thousand Oaks is in Ventura County, about 60 miles northwest of LA, and it was a great experience. You know, I think the original idea between on elections was really to have it be more like jury duty than a contest of, like, popularity and economics and good hair. We really, as one of my favorite podcasters, Tom Hartman, says, democracy is not a spectator sport. You tag, you're it. Sadly, a democracy needs a well-educated populace, and I just recently heard that we're getting like a failing grade in civics education among some of our younger demographic. So this definitely needs to be addressed and reversed. I think America is really not just a nation with great ideas. It's actually kind of the hope of civilization. It's an experiment, an ongoing experiment to see if rights can be expanded for people rather than contracted. History has seen historically fluctuations of rights being expanded and contracted, and I think we need to actually upgrade human rights to what I would call humane rights, where we take into account all the stakeholders of the biosphere and the future of the biosphere. And I've always been really excited about the prospect of us becoming a Kardashev level civilization. Right now, we don't even rate on the Kardashev scale, where we're not using the entire energy of a planet. We're actually kind of in negative overshoot level. Our civilization is using up the biosphere at a completely unsustainable rate. I think something like 4.5 times is the number of planets we would need to sustain the current level of resource consumption. And the miracle of voluntary association is often not taken fully into account. If you take all the voluntary interactions between humans, that's essentially what's sometimes called the free market. And to make the free market really free and fair, we need to address past disparities, bad uses of resources. Like, there are things that should be not monopolized, like land, like air. These things that are necessary for survival should not be the domain of monopolies. And there's actually a great set of philosophies called Georgism or Geoism, which would use things like a location value tax to undo the unfair monopoly of things like land. People should, keep what they make, but pay for what they take. And we essentially have a worldwide system which is very distorted in that people are not paying fairly for what they've taken from what should be the commons or the collective. So that's something I'd like to see addressed more. I'd like to see the past harms to indigenous populations addressed. Truth and reconciliation commissions are what healed some of the harms in South Africa to apartheid very, very well. And it just sometimes the acknowledgement of past history and an apology is enough to sort of knit together a society. So how am I doing on time?
17 seconds left.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll say more about that, but yeah, we should be like a emergency response for lifeboat civilization. We need that right now in the world.
All right. Thank you to candidate Tweed. You had 4 seconds remaining, so we will add 4 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, candidate Tom Ross, please proceed with your introductory remarks.
Thank you all for being here and for my fellow transhumanists. The first sentence in my recent book, Open Source Citizen, reads, "I know I won't win the election for president, so why am I running?" Well, I'm running to break certain harmful political paradigms that have never served us, the biggest one being divide and rule. And this tactic has worked since we began organizing civilization, and it will continue to work in America as long as we only have 2 parties to choose from. Now, one way I had hoped to chip away at this paradigm was to use this primary campaign as an example. And my hope was that there would be at least 6 candidates joining this race who would come to these roundtables and discuss their causes or the biggest problems that they wanted to solve. And ideally, those problems would align with certain cabinet seats so that the electorate would be voting for a group. A president and his or her cabinet secretaries could hit the ground running, and the public could know exactly what they would be doing on day one. But it's just me and Dan, so that's about 12 cabinet seats each, so we got a lot of work to do. So another reason I'm running is to help clear a path for younger, smarter, digital natives, and hopefully transhumanist candidates. Now, when I was young, a young person, my generation didn't have a cool name like Generation X. We were still in the shadow of this massive group of baby boomers, and they called us the post-baby boom generation. Now, I was a very intense and very engaged 20-something. But when I spoke to older people about my concerns about the environment or our fears of nuclear war, most of them just shined me on, and I vowed that when I was an older person, my age now, I would pay attention to young people and not to be as dismissive as the people were to me. Now, while I've kept that vow, partially because of my experience, but mostly because as a member of the last generation with an analog childhood, I have no idea how to help myself or the first generation of digital natives navigate this digital world. So that's another huge part of my campaign, to reach out to as many young people as possible and to listen and to learn and to ask them to be advisors in my campaign. And just like the younger me, I'm finding them to be very intense, very engaged, and very suspicious of people my age. Now, the other key advisors in my campaign are AI systems. In fact, my campaign manager is an AI system. And I'm doing this not only because they can advise me without ego or hidden motives, but because I want to demonstrate how important it is to integrate AI systems into how we campaign and how we govern our nation. And so now, if you're familiar with me or my work, you know that I've been on this campaign for over a decade to alleviate the fear of AI. I do this because it's a vital tool for my primary cause, to fight human trafficking and child exploitation. And that's actually the reason I joined the party in the first place, because their constitution really addresses these issues. So finally, we face far too many threats to be distracted by attention-seeking toddler politicians. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to get busy doing it. And so with that, I'm looking forward to this conversation. And this is, I'm glad that we're doing this as a roundtable. I'm glad that we're doing it as a productive way so that people can see how we work together towards solutions instead of soundbite laden mudslinging debates, with rehearsed sound bites. And so this is a very positive way to chip away at that political paradigm that is really destroying our nation and destroying just the species if we're not careful. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm looking forward to your questions. And I hope that we can really come to some real solutions, and this roundtable being an example that will chip away at that divide and conquer, divide and rule paradigm.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And you have 1 minute that will carry over to your future speaking segments. And now for our first question of the roundtable, I would invite Dr. Bill Andrews, who is the founder and CEO of Sierra Sciences, as well as our biotechnology advisor, to pose the question. Bill, please go ahead. Bill, I think we need you to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I came in with two questions, but Daniel reminded me that there's a third issue that I'm concerned about too. But mostly it's, I'm concerned about the Silver Tsunami that's coming and the healthcare system. But I'm also concerned about the past harms to indigenous nations, and that's why I'm wearing my American Indian for president shirt today. But I'm concerned about the choices people have, especially when they are when they have a terminal disease and they are denied medical treatment by experimental treatments because it might harm them when they already have a terminal disease, which doesn't make sense to me at all. And so I'd be interested in hearing both candidates discuss how they are going to do something to help promote the idea of allowing patients to be able to get special precedences for experimental treatments, especially when they are terminal. The other thing is the Silver Tsunami, which is, as we know, we're all going to be getting older. A lot of us, well, me older than most of the people on this call, but the younger people are far outnumbering the older people. And not very far in the future, we are going to have a situation where there are not enough people to take care of the elderly. So we're going to have not enough caregivers, essentially. So I've always thought that the solution to that problem is the robotics industry. And I would like to see some discussion about pushing for robotics industry to start really getting on the ball in terms of developing robots to be caregivers both in hospitals and at homes. So those are two issues. But I'm interested in hearing thoughts on how we can make up for the mistakes that we've made regarding our indigenous nations. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you to Bill, and each candidate will have 3 minutes for answering this set of questions. Candidate Tweed, please proceed.
It's interesting. I think you can actually tie together the indigenous issue and the healthcare issue, because indigenous peoples were really attuned to the medicinal herbs and the different therapies that existed all around them. Unfortunately, our medical model has been based on something called allopathy, which is basically suppressing the symptoms associated with a pathology. In order to establish the AMA, there was a concerted campaign to throw out any reference to naturopathy or homeopathy or anything that didn't conform with what some have called the petrocriminal pharmaceutical complex. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have great trauma care, we have great acute care, but for chronic care, I think the Western healthcare delivery system has really fallen down because of these medical cartels and their influence on suppressing things like oxygen therapies, which are well known and well used in Europe, but outside of America, I mean, maybe you can get some hyperbaric treatment from a chiropractor. Or things like that, but yeah, the Silver Tsunami. I'm gonna go in on 63 this year. I'm on the public option for healthcare and collecting my meager Social Security from the government. I hope they get their budget act together. And then to address the indigenous thing, I think I'm part of this X Prize concept to build an equatorial belt of seasteads to counteract the carbon imbalance in the atmosphere. And I think much as Antarctica is divided into these different zones, I think we can take this equatorial zone and divide it into zones for every acknowledged tribe on Earth, where they will sort of have a symbolic foothold, or an actual foothold too, where they can create an experimental social organizations, free of the clutches of the existing monopolies and coercive rules. So that's kind of opening another can of worms there. But I don't have my timer going. I think that's probably close to 3 minutes.
Yes.
I should.
You will have 30 seconds to carry over to subsequent speaking slots. Thank you for your answer, Candidate Tweed. And now we will go to Candidate Ross.
Well, I think this is another reason why I am trying to alleviate the fear of AI, because it can solve so many of these issues, not only existential threats, but it can handle, how we are going to take on this silver tsunami. And I think, we're seeing boomers are aging. And luckily, the millennials and younger are a massive group, even more massive than the boomers. And so I've been saying for a while that, palliative care or home care is a booming business, because the more that baby boomers get older, the more care they're going to need. And we do have young people that are now moving into this workforce. And so I think it's a smart move. We need more nurses. We need all of this. But also with AI, we're flying with a flock of black swans right now. There is going to be so many solutions if we know how to work with it, if we have the right prompts and we're not afraid of it primarily, then we will be able to answer a lot of these questions. And so it's like, the way it's working in even pathology, it is able to diagnose from a history and a worldwide global database to identify certain symptoms and what they may be the cause of. And so but we'll always need a human being. We'll always need some human with this, massive supercomputer we have in our skulls. If it doesn't feel right, if a pathologist AI gives a certain diagnosis because of all of this information it has, we're still going to need a human being there who may agree with it or not. So it's going to be very important that we have human beings involved and augmented by these systems, because that's one of our superpowers, is this kind of intuition, this qualia that we always take in. And so we will be able to help shepherd these AIs, but in a very real way, we need to start teaching our young people how to properly prompt these AIs. How to ask the right questions to get the right answers. And so that's going to be a big push, is how we are properly asking these questions with AI. And so the tide will turn. I think the tide is turning. We're seeing that already, even with psilocybin as a treatment for PTSD and many other things, that this tide is turning from being the kind of square conservative approach to, hating everything that has any alternative effects, to that's changing now. It started with my generation, Generation X, and it's becoming more and more frequent. It was put on hold, with the counterculture of the 60s. The baby boomers brought this all out, and and so it was put on hold because it got too out of hand. But now the tide's turning. We're starting to look at alternative medicines now, and I think we're going to see more of that. And so I think we're going to see that tide turning, but we also need to understand that AI will be able to help us a lot in this endeavor. And so, and with the whole healthcare thing, it's what's crazy is that we're the only industrialized nation superpower that doesn't have a medic on our team. We're out there fighting on the field of this global, game. And we're the only team that doesn't have somebody on the sidelines waiting to fix us, to help us. And so I think that's one way to make the argument for healthcare. There's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of conservative right-wing people that are against healthcare just because of whoever was proposing it. But if we look at it in the terms of needing a medic on our team, that we are fighting against China and different countries in Europe and Russia, we're going out there and we're being injured without a medic on the sidelines. And so there's a way to frame all of these arguments to get us all on the same page. And so that's one thing I want to start doing, is just reframing these conversations. We need to be transpartisan. We need to be above all of this divide and rule. And so when it comes to Indigenous people, yes, absolutely. And we need to recognize, if anything, what has happened. That goes a long way to at least admitting that my ancestors, my white ancestors, were the problem, and to understand that, and to not, and not fight back against that. Just understand it. Just be empathetic enough to understand that I may not have been like that, but probably people in my family were. And so that comes from just the way history worked out, and we can't be in denial of what we have done as a heritage, as a people. But we're also, I think, one of the best advances lately is being able to get your DNA tested. And we're finding that we are not just one race, that we are a mutt. We are mutts, and we are made up of so many different genetic traces that it's hard to find what that blood quantum is. Who are you really? And so I think that's a really positive move, is being able to test your DNA and see and understand that you are not one race. And so I'm hoping to see more of that happen, where people understand that they are a mixture. We are all a mixture. We're all from the same mitochondrial Eve. Race is a social construct, right? We are all from the same mitochondrial Eve, the same mother, ultimately. And so I think we need to understand that more. We need to work towards that, but we also need to recognize what certain groups of us did that were wrong. I think that might be 3.
Well, thank you, Candidate Ross, and you spoke for 5 minutes and 50 seconds. So we are going to subtract 170 seconds from your future speaking times. And thank you to Dr. Bill Andrews for the questions that you posed. And now let us see if Liz Parrish is able to ask a question.
Hi, sorry guys, I'm traveling right now, so I am just literally here to listen in. One thing that I would love to hear is just more direct answers to the questions. And anyway, please just let me listen in, and I would be happy to do that. Good luck, guys.
All right, thank you to Liz. And now let us go to our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, for his question.
Yeah, thank you, Gennady, and thank you to both of the candidates for showing up today. I loved both of your intro comments and what I've heard so far. So the question that I have, and I have a few here, but I only ask one right now. I think one of our major contributions to this political process is raising awareness and getting attention and letting people hear that there are various sides to the issue, just not a predominant left or a predominant right or predominant Republican or predominant Democrat. So we'll start with one that both of those sides have dug in on a little bit, and that has to do with the debate over transsexuals. You have that on the right and you have that on the left, and they seem pretty well dug in, and sometimes the transsexual label and the transhumanist label get overlapped, and there's various discussions about that. Perhaps that's something that we can take advantage of during this campaign, but I'd like to hear both the candidates talk about the confusion, their and their way of addressing this that benefits transhumanism in general.
Thank you to David for that question. And candidate Tweed, please proceed. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I've got actually a very close friend who transitioned in the last decade from Kevin to Karen, and has a lot of thoughts on this issue. You know, gender obviously exists on a cultural spectrum, whereas biological gender is chromosomal. I mean, you really can't alter your biology chromosome by chromosome. If they have to identify some human remains, they will come up with, oh, that was a male or a female, based on the chromosomes. But that doesn't mean that people don't have gender dysphoria. They don't have you know, the feeling that they're trapped in the wrong body, and those things are a reality. That you know, I think 1 in 10 people tends to have a gender identity that doesn't match their biological gender identity. So these attempts to suppress this forcefully with coercion, like they're doing in Florida and like they do in a lot of less free countries around the world, is just a blatant violation of humane rights and human rights. And I hope we can put this issue at the fore, that show that we're a party that's tolerant and seeks truth and science-based, evidence-based information, and not stigma and fear and oppressive traditions. Although traditions do need to be respected, parents should have leeway in how they want to raise their offspring. So there's a fine balance to be struck there, but I think we can make that a big focus of the transhumanist policy agenda. And I hope that answered the question, sort of. I appreciate what Liz said about not speaking in like platitudes and giving direct answers. And I'm glad Liz is here. I voted for her in the last election. Wrote her in, and hopefully we'll have not just write-ins, but actual printed ballots with the USTP party and candidates. So.
Yes, thank you, candidate Tweed. We will add 40 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, candidate Ross, you have the floor. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, let people be what they want to be. I mean, there's questions about, you know, when kids are younger and maybe it's a rebellion thing, and every younger generation will find a way to rebel that just freaks out parents, you know, and there's maybe some of that going on, but I think the majority of it is true and real. And when we're seeing that, this is a very, I think, positive trend in our species. You know, we're becoming, our identities are in entropy. You know, whether we are male or female or masculine or feminine, that all those constructs are an entropy. And, you know, I know that there are studies that show that people who are homophobic, people who are really against it, are really closeted homosexuals themselves. A lot of them are. And that's because even the Congress people that put up bills to fight against, you know, gay rights and all this stuff, you'll find that many of them are suppressing that information in themselves. And that's because that's why it's a source of friction for these people. And that's why they want to fight against it, because you don't fight against something that you're not dealing with internally. You don't project something that you are not dealing with in your own self. So I think that's a really important understanding, is to understand the science of the people that are so against it are the people that are suppressing it in themselves. And that's a good, I think, argument to make when you have people who are so against homosexuality or transgender issues. And, you know, even I was speaking with a couple of years ago with a couple of very liberal friends in Colorado. And I said, you know, I'm working with the Transhumanist Party. And they're like, well, you know, the whole trans thing. And it's like, these are very liberal, democratic people. who were shying away from the prefix of trans, and that first made me realize, okay, there may be an issue here, but we shouldn't be distracted by that. We should own it. We should understand. We should actually define the actual definition of that prefix of trans. And, so I think it's really important to not shy away from any of these things, and to lean into them, in fact. And we really need to understand that these people, these transgender people, these people that are either in transition or want to, they're hurting. They're human beings. They've got this internal mechanism that isn't working with the biology or the social constructs that society and culture has put on them. And it's a shame that there's so many other countries. We're dealing with this now here, but there are many countries that'll take generations, if ever, for them to get over this. There's certain countries in Africa that I've consulted with, and I said there's certain cultural constructs that don't work for an American investor, and the misogyny or the anti-gay kind of attitude there. But anyway, I think it's just very important to not be distracted by this stuff, because it is a distraction. It's the new enemy. It was Russia, then whatever it is, it's a new way to demonize a group of people, and it's distracting from what we really need to be focused on. And in my case, it's within a mile or less of most people watching this video, there's a child being exploited or abused. That's the most important thing for me to focus on. And so worrying about somebody who wants to dress up in a different gender or whatever it is not important. We need to get serious about what we need to take care of. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will subtract 50 seconds from your future speaking times. And now we will move on to our next question. I would invite our current Vice President and Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, to pose the next question.
Yeah, I've got a question possibly along the wedge issue of gun control. Being that the right to bear arms is in the Constitution and that's been upheld, but technology might possibly make firearms as they exist now obsolete. I mean, in the future, you can have all sorts of magical devices that are they going to be considered arms? Is that going to be an appropriate tool for people to have and own? And, what are your thoughts on how technology can be used, and sometimes as depicted in science fiction, how it can be used to stop people who intend to do harm with a weapon, because almost anything can become a weapon. So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Art Ramon, for that question. And Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, weapons are tools, and like any tool, it can be purposed for good or ill. A friend of mine who's a science fiction writer, now deceased, Neil Schulman, wrote a book called Stopping Power, kind of a double wordplay in the title, but he said, every 8 seconds, a gun is used to stop a crime. Now, you don't hear about these instances of self-defense, legitimate self-defensive use of tools. And Art is right. There's many tools that could deal lethality or sublethal, choices. But the main thing is, a car is a tool. We have massive death and destruction caused by cars, but cars are massively useful. So what do? We make sure people that drive them are properly trained. We make sure the cars are registered. We make sure there's liability coverage on the cars. And we should be doing exactly the same thing with lethal tools, such as firearms and other weapons. That to me is the logical midpoint that both parts of the debate should find common ground on. We're not that far from being able to do that. Well, that's a debatable question. And it is a wedge issue. You're right, because people just God, guns, and and glory. I mean, that's like the core. Look at all the right-wing candidates that have these pictures taken with their whole family posing with assault weaponry. That really gets the the one side polarized. But the right to life is the most fundamental of human rights, and that includes the right to defend your life from those who would take your life. So I'm a big supporter of properly corralled access to life defending technology, and I think there's a lot of progress to be made on that issue. But it's going to remain, just like cars. We haven't solved the problem with car fatalities, so we should treat the gun fatality issue in the same spirit as the car fatality issue. So I hope that provided some insights on the question. Thanks for that again.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 21 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Well, arguing with pro-gun or anti-gun folks makes them more entrenched in their positions. So there's not a real way to approach this. We need to make Republicrats the common enemy of the people. Now, in between the years of 29 to 2011, there were, I think, 55 mass shootings, 350 something Americans that were killed. And this is a 3-year span where the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency, but there was no relevant gun legislation put forward. So the question is, why not? And who is really putting the dark money behind these two parties to make that happen? And so even though most responsible gun owners believe in background checks, at least, why isn't that happening? And so what we need to do is we need to really have a mandatory audit of these federal officials every year to really investigate where their money is coming from, whether it's lobbyists, whether it's oligarchs, whoever is pumping money into them to make them parrot these issues. I think that's one of my platform planks. It's called the Audit the Elite Act. And so, but one thing we can do is to respect both sides. We can't be in denial that guns are everywhere. And I think that's one of the reasons we've never been attacked on our soil, because every other country knows that we're holding, right? Nobody's going to attack when they know that there's so many more guns in this country than there are people. And so I think that's one way to understand why we haven't been attacked here. But also what we could do is have responsible gun owners, knowing that we are not going to solve this, that nobody's going to take their guns away, and knowing that it's a problem, is to have responsible gun owners actually educate communities of how to understand guns or how to properly store them or use them. And that will give gun owners the respect that they require. And it'll also teach the liberals that this is a reality and this is how responsible gun owners should be acting, And so there's a transpartisan way to get above all of this, and that's what I want to push for. And but also we really need to understand who is funding these Congress people who will not make simple legislation. And they won't gin up this idea that everyone's trying to take your guns, when most of the responsible gun owners want something as simple as a background check.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will add 10 seconds to your future speaking times. And now our next question will be posed by our Secretary, Brent Elman.
Thank you, Gennady. Tom, Daniel. You have mentioned a couple times now, Tom, transpartisan efforts, just on the tail end of these discussions on these wedge topics, such as gun control and gender rights. I'm wondering what some methods that you might propose, some general methods for the USTP to adopt and utilize that might be able to encourage and facilitate healthy discussions between folks who are already currently so stuck on these polarizing wedge issues like abortion, gun control, and gender rights, that they're, at the current state, unable to even engage with these other folks on the other side of the fence. What are some ways that you think you can help mediate these types of relationships?
Thank you for that question, Brent. And now, candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes to respond.
Yeah, encouraging greater policies discussions among individuals and communities. That, I think, is really the secret sauce that the Transhumanist Party could pursue in this and future contests. Really, policies should be debated and crafted nonstop on a 24/7 hour basis. There's a great discussion platform called Kialo, where you can do this kind of thing, and you can see the pros. Anyone can post pros and cons, and you kind of get this infographical picture of the pros and cons on a particular topic, policy topic. Another thing that I see is, as a faith-based transhumanist, I think the faith community can play an immense role here. There's so much room for interfaith community organizing, just on things like food security and defensive security, a neighborhood watch kind of thing. Having libraries where tools are loaned out, just like you can check out books from a public library. We should have maker spaces with tool lending. And I think there's all kinds of churches that have empty rooms that aren't being used. And I know we've had transhumanist salon speakers from the Islamic, the Christian, the Mormon branches of transhumanism, and I think that's great. I know a lot of transhumanists are agnostic or atheist, but frankly, if you look at the improbabilities of physics for this universe to even exist, it to me it seems it takes a lot of faith to think that there's no greater creator kind of behind this whole wonderful thing we call reality and existence. But I think to get more conversations going, anthropology can inform this topic. The idea of the Dunbar number, that you can only really have close relationships in a lifetime with maybe 100 or 200 people. We should have our Dunbar tribes that we want to cultivate during our times here alive. And ideally, that's going to be people that are geographically close to you. Doesn't have to be, but it would be nice. And I think that kind of more neighbor to neighbor kinds of activities will tend to counteract this wedge issue, entrenchment, where you can't convince people with facts. Facts tend to just entrench them harder. So but the one-on-one interactions in a neighborhood setting are just solid gold.
Thank you, candidate Tweed, and you spoke exactly for 3 minutes. So we will now move on to candidate Ross. You have 3 minutes. Please begin. And you will need to unmute.
I was doing so well. No, rational discord is one of our core ideals in the party. And so that's one way to become transpartisan. And so what that requires to have rational discord with another person is respect. We need to respect. We need to put ourselves in their shoes, understand their position thoroughly. That's empathy. That's our superpower as human beings, if we let it be. And but it also requires not being in denial, not having trying to get rid of as many confirmation biases and all of these mind traps that we have. To try to get as few of those into the conversation as possible, so that we can have rational discord and we can work through these things. There's so much out there right now, and we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, on one of the salons. Is taking the other side of anything only entrenches the other person. So it's not about having a good argument against that person. It's like if there's a MAGA person who identifies with their ideology, you're no truth or no fact. And if you have a very left-wing socialist who is very staunch about their beliefs in socialism, and if they identify as that, if that's part of their identity, there's no truth, no facts that will matter. And so it's really about first maybe creating a common enemy. Now, I did this when we had a tree fall on our house, and it wasn't too bad. It was, it was enough to get some good home improvements out of it. But with the assessor who called, rather than working against him because he was going to try to give us as little money as possible from the insurance company, I understood that he's also a homeowner. And so I kind of got him on my side to where it's him and me against the insurance companies, and so that worked because I humanized him. And so there's a way we can do that in rational discord with any situation, even between a socialist and a MAGA person can come to common ground if they realize that there is a common enemy, and it's about identifying that common enemy and not pretending, making an authentic common enemy. And so so what's funny is I honestly right now don't know who most of the my fellow officers in the party voted for last. I don't know their politics because we don't talk about wedge issues. We don't get into that. We talk above all that. We talk about transhumanist issues, technological singularity, things that are going to matter in the next 100 years. So I can honestly say, and it's probably good that I don't know, because that would give my own biases for or against them. I don't know where most of these people vote, who they voted for in the last election, and that's a good thing. And so, yeah, I think that's the way to do it, is to identify a common enemy, an authentic common enemy, and just be rational and find common ground. There's a way to do that, but it requires getting rid of so many of these biases that we bring to the party.
Thank you, Candidate Ross, and we will subtract 18 seconds from your future speaking times. And now I would like to invite our friend Zach Varkaris, who is the founder of Austin Biotech, to pose the next question to the candidates. Let's see. And Zach, you will need to unmute yourself. You would need to unmute the microphone on your end. Looks like he disconnected for whatever reason, but I have added him back onto the stream.
Hi,
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Yeah,
Yes,
sorry
we
about
can.
that.
Thank
Well,
you.
you can tell I need to be joining this party because I need some technology help here, clearly. Yeah, I mean, realistically, none of you candidates have a chance of becoming president in this short, in any meaningful term. But politics is, in essence, compromise. So, how do you propose enticing mainstream voters to your platform, and why should they go for it? I mean, what are your realistic aims and ambitions for the 2024 election? The things that people can really hold on to, not just big ideals, but something that's realistically tangible results.
Thank you, Zach, for that question. And Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes.
Well, the founding fathers of America were very opposed to the divisiveness that would be brought about by political parties. But, politics has really descended into this first past the poll duopoly chaos, kind of thing. And I think just getting the, ranked choice voting would be such a huge improvement on the current policy discussions, because right now it is just kind of a mutual sabotage, false binary choices. So it's probably not going to happen, this election. Well, I would say definitely not. But you know what? We can expand the policy discussion, the so-called Overton window of what is considered allowable in the public discussion, and just putting out the list of all the minor parties. There's an amazing diversity of policy ideas in the minor policy field. And one thing I'm hoping we could put out soon is a kind of a spreadsheet infographic that shows the various minor parties and their different policy ideas. I mean, you got the Libertarian Party, which is kind of floundering now since they seem to be courting a lot of Republican bigot types. They seem to have kicked out all the more left libertarian elements. The Green Party, there's the Pirate Party, which has actually held office in Iceland for several years and is very big overseas. Then they tend to, they're not about piracy, but they're about information wanting to be free and open source and all kinds of really important ideas. I think there's a lot of things we have in common with the movement for a People's Party is one. I'm probably leaving out all the other minor parties, but I think there was a Socialist Party candidate that pointed out, I never won, but 9 out of 10 of our policy planks got adopted by the Democratic Party. So, never discount the influence that minor parties can have on the mainstream parties. But, I would like to see the whole mainstream duopoly go away in favor of, a more ranked choice voting, more parliamentary style politics, because right now it's just you're gonna get the worst of both worlds with this first past the poll kind of decision making. And I see my countdown timer is running out, so I'll hopefully that answered your question, and thanks for that question. Great question.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed, and you will have 6 seconds carried over to your subsequent speaking slots. And now, Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know if am I on? Yeah, I don't know if you were at the top at the beginning, but I know that I won't win this election, and that's not the point of running. This is about putting forward certain issues to, just as Dan said, to move either party in one direction or the other. And this is really, my campaign is about clearing the path of all of this bullshit for a digital native, a younger, smarter, hopefully transhumanist candidate in the future. We need to get serious. And so that's part of why I'm running, is to make these points. And I've got certain campaign platform planks that I think will resonate with certain people. One of them is we need to put forward a whole new cabinet seat I'm calling the Singularity Secretary. We need somebody who is in the executive branch who is addressing the technological singularity and all the ancillary issues that will bring. There's neither party is meeting the minimum system requirements for what we need to be taken care of right now. And so that's one thing I wanted to push forward. The other thing is that I think we really need to have mandatory independent auditors looking at our federal officials. We need to know where their money is. It's easy to hide money. Unless you are being audited in a mandatory way. We're having your financial statements looked at and investigated, so we know why certain candidates keep pushing maybe Putin's talking points, or they are not allowing gun control, easy, simple gun control measures to go forward. Where is that money coming from? We need to know that. And there's so many opportunities for corruption. And so I think that's the common enemy. The common enemy are these two parties. And so that's one way to get push our policy forward. If as now the USTP is a very meticulous, well-run machine. We've learned a lot in the last cycle, and now it's getting more and more fine-tuned. And so it's a very important way to get our ideas across, not just transhumanist ideas, but just general kind of populist anti-corruption ideas. And so again, I'm not running to win. I know that I won't be walking into the White House in January of 2025. That's not what this is about. It's about putting forward all these ideas and clearing the path for younger, smarter digital natives to take that office.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And we are going to add 15 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we do have a question from Liz Parrish, and the question is posted up on the screen. She asks, how would our candidates handle the disparity in medical insurance coverage and the high cost of medicine, which in her words is the highest in the world, even though we have the shortest lifespan of any industrialized country? Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Well, you know, my favorite country for solving a lot of these issues, being half Norwegian, is Norway for the win. I mean, you look at how many great things Norway has done policy-wise, and one of them is making healthcare in effect right of citizenship, and really it should be that way worldwide. I mean, I think there's the single payer option, the public option. Various candidates have tried to bring these about. I think most notably Bernie Sanders, who probably would have won if the Democratic Party hadn't sabotaged him. But yeah, I think the only thing that prevents this from being done are the monopoly moneyed interests that are just making too much darn money off the current healthcare delivery system. We almost have a disease maintenance system rather than a healthcare delivery system. Another thing that could be done is by breaking some of these medical cartels. I think the AMA defines any treatment that's not surgery, radiation, or chemo. Any cancer treatment that's not those three things is just by definition quackery. And this is a blatant example of defining yourself into a monopoly position. So yeah, we really need to have healthcare be universal. You wouldn't see a person dying on the street and just ignore them, but that's what we're sort of collectively doing as a country by not making healthcare universal and affordable and a humane right. If anything's a humane right, not dying is the biggest humane right. So great question, Liz, and we need to work out the details on how to do this. It's a big discussion.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 42 seconds to your future speaking slots. And Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Well, Liz, I have no idea. But one skill I do have is knowing who to ask and getting the right people together to answer that. Again, there's arguments to be made when you have right-wing people who are against healthcare, that don't they realize that we are playing on this global field, and we are again the only team without a medic on the sidelines. But this country is kind of built away from that. We are an entropy. We are controlled entropy. Individual rights. It's a wild west here, and it's kind of the way it's designed. But it's why the Libertarian Party, a lot of it makes sense to me, but we have to do more now than just protect the borders and deliver the mail. There's so much more complexity now in our society that
kind of
again, it'd be me asking people like you, how do we do this? How do we solve this disparity? And not assuming that I have all the answers, but what I can do though is make the arguments, the transpartisan arguments to both sides. That why are people voting against their needs? Well, they're voting against their own interests, and that's part of breaking down this whole divide and conquer paradigm. And and we're being played. Why? Bernie Sanders aside, we're being played. Both Republicans and Democrats. Why don't we have national health care? It's because they are playing us against each other. It's a classic divide and rule tactic. And so that's one point I really want to make is and it's just like I was saying before, when the Democrats had the presidency in both houses of Congress and no reasonable gun legislation was passed, why not? You know, and it's because they are a two-headed snake, and they're fed by our fears. They are fed by, you know, the ratings and revenues that our engagement with them have. And so we need to understand that. And that's another thing. If we have that question come up about the algorithms that are dividing us. But yeah, I honestly, Liz, I have no idea, but I do know who to ask. And that would be a very important question and a very important task force to get going.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will add 22 seconds to your subsequent speaking slots. And next, I would invite our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, to pose the next question.
I will get away from my longevity area and ask, so you guys both represent unique takes on transhumanism. How would you say you differ most, one, from each other, and two, from whatever you'd define transhumanism to be?
Thank you for that question, Ben. And Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes.
You know, some transhumanists see evolution as really in the driver's seat, and if we transition from DNA-based evolution to photon or electronic-based evolution, that's just great with them. I tend to have more of a faith-based transhumanist view that we are the products of a greater creator, living in a greater creation, and we need to make that loving creativity real by caring for ourselves, the creation, and others around us. That's my position on the idea of transhumanism. You know, I mean, the basis of the universe seems to tend toward away from entropy and towards extropy, or more complexity, more organized patternhood. But I think the challenge is not to lose your soul connection in the process of becoming an agent of evolution. So this is something that should really be at the forefront of a healthy discussion. It really calls into question the deepest philosophical issues that have been debated since people invented thought and language. So I just think the transhumanist movement is to be congratulated for not shying away from these topics, and we should be encouraged and happy to educate others to consider them and think about them. I know Tom has kind of a Gnostic agnostic metaphysical position that I won't try to fully understand, but you know, I think we're probably on a similar page when it comes to the idea of we are the products of a greater creator in a greater creation. But I don't know. I'm equally okay with having these discussions with anyone, regardless of their faith or lack of it. So I hope that answered the question, and I'd love to talk on and think about that more.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 24 seconds to your future speaking slots. And Candidate Ross, please begin. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, it's antagonistic. I like to argue about religion. Yeah, I have Gnostic tendencies myself. But you know what first brought me to this party, it wasn't my need for longevity. It wasn't I want to upload my consciousness to a hard drive. It was I had an opportunity to drive from Colorado to New Mexico. It was a 6-hour trip, and I was able to listen to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights while doing that drive. It took about that long to get through it, but they have really practical solutions and really practical ideas about my cause, which is the ending of child exploitation. And so I thought, well, these people are serious. So this is a real thing. And also having written the first novel for artificial intelligence, the first novel for machine kind, it made sense to join the party and to later become the director of sentient rights advocacy. And so all of this just kind of came together in a really good way. And my book is about teaching AI empathy for our plight and having it understand the issue of child exploitation, so that when and if it wakes up, it will have this automatic empathy. It will imprint on us in the best way. So, but I don't see a whole lot of difference between me and Dan. I respect him greatly, his knowledge, his activism, everything he's been doing. I respect. I wish I had that amount of energy in some ways, but you know, I'm not a great proponent for longevity. You know, that's not my issue in transhumanism. I understand it. I think it's important to enhance the quality of life. To me, transhumanism is, I've seen videos of young people, children who get new limbs, and they're just accepted by their classmates. And that just fills my heart. And that's what transhumanism is to me. It's about increasing the quality of life for everybody, especially young children. You know, and whenever I watch those videos of children who can hear their mothers for the first time because of some cochlear implant, it floors me. I cry every time, you know, and to me, that's transhumanism. That is using, that's using our God-given gift to perfect our evolution, to fix the things that aren't working, and to use love as, you know, I always say we need to put the human back in transhuman, because our narrative has been hijacked. It's become its own genre where people think that transhumanism has a dark agenda, you know, that we all want to be robots and we are paving the way for a robot overlord. And that's not the case, at least not with me. I mean, sure, that's kind of cool, you know, if that was the case for some cases, but it's not true. And so I believe there's as many transhumanists as there are people who identify as transhuman. And everybody comes to this for a different reason. And we need to understand that. We did a whole campaign a couple of years ago of why I am transhuman. And we had so many people that were explaining that. A few people here, even on the panel, who spent a minute or so explaining why they identify as transhuman. And it was just to show the breadth of the type of people that identify as transhuman. And we need to get more of that out there. And so that's all I have to say about that. Hope I hit.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And we will subtract 28 seconds from your future speaking times. And the next question will come from me. And this is in reference to the US Transhumanist Party's core ideal number 1, which states that the Transhumanist Party supports significant life extension achieved through the progress of science and technology. And my question is, if you were to become the presidential nominee of the US Transhumanist Party, how would you advance core ideal number 1, which is the first and foremost and main core ideal of the Transhumanist Party? Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
I think when we talk about life extension, it's important that we not just make that a quantitative issue, but a qualitative issue. I think quality of life is just as important, if not more important, than quantity of life. Who would want to be immortal in a condition of abject suffering? I think we can all agree that quality and quantity are of longevity are tied together. So we have a lot of progress being made on this front. The decoding of the human genome was an immense step. I have no doubt that with the current explosion of AI help that we are seeing, that we can put this question to Chat GPTX at some point, and maybe get some amazing insights or methods to approach it that we hadn't even thought of. I think, you know, my friend lived in Thailand for about 10 years, and this is the same one that I mentioned that transitioned gender-wise. And she said, you know, it was amazing how cheap and how plentiful healthcare options were in Thailand. You could go out on the street and there would be so many different providers of health technologies. It's like she would say, "We think we're free here. I mean, you got to go overseas and see, some of these other countries where they have a real free market in not just healthcare, but practically everything. I mean, I don't want to see the free market be so plentiful that there's dangerous stuff being offered or misinformation. But yeah, I mean, science and technology is definitely the friend of life extension. I mean, it was ever since the first person started a fire to stay warm and not freeze to death, that they were a transhuman. We've been, they extended their life, and we need to be supportive of health, science, and technology. I think breaking up monopolies in it is going to be a big part of that. Letting people have access to more do-it-yourself kinds of health technologies, and actually, you are allowed to experiment on yourself. And if you read the current medical regulations, if you don't introduce it into commercial commerce, there's all kinds of amazing self-experimentation possibilities. I'll wrap it up there because that's my time.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 4 seconds to your future speaking times. And Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Well, again, longevity, life extension, radical life extension. I think as long as it is has certain controls on it, we want to provide for people who live longer. I mean, if we're going to live 200 years, we need to readjust a lot of institutions, healthcare, insurance, all of these things need to come along with it. So that opens up a great conversation. But we can also make certain cultural tweaks to control population. For instance, if we took out the whole social mores of somebody saying to their newlywed children, when are you going to give me grandkids? And that whole push to wanting grandkids, even little tweaks like that. And we're seeing that a lot of young people are kind of moving away from that. They are becoming very practical when it comes to not wanting to have too many children, depending on where they live. And so I think this is kind of working itself out anyway in our species. There's some sort of biological evolutionary phenomenon that is occurring to where we are preparing for living longer. And so I think it's really important that we balance out our need for living longer with our resources and how we're using them. A lot of people will say, well, it's not really an overpopulation problem because at some point we'll figure it out. Technology will figure out how to provide for everybody. But at what cost? Because that's a very anthropocentric point of view. It's like humans first. We are the most important thing, regardless of the biosphere, regardless of the 100+ species that go extinct every day because of our ravenous appetite for resources. We need to be aware of that. It's not just us here, and we need to better control how we are using our resources. And again, we're flying with a whole flock of black swans, and those black swans all have AIs in their brains, right? We have a real opportunity with AI to ask the right questions and to get us to avert some of these issues of overpopulation, of how to live longer and enhance the quality of our life.
Thank you, Candidate Ross, and we will add 40 seconds to your future speaking slots. And now we have another audience question from Sophia's Roulette, who wonders, what ideas do the candidates have about the criminal justice and incarceration system that we currently have? Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Okay, we have really an echo of the slavery system that just kind of morphed into the mass incarceration system. And this is something that desperately needs to be addressed. The inequalities that have been structurally perpetrated in not just in America, but worldwide. But, it's funny that we're supposedly the guardians of the free world, but per capita, we also have the largest imprisoned population of any country on earth. So something is definitely not adding up that way. I think you've got too many people imprisoned for what are essentially victimless crimes. Where there's the libertarians have a saying, "No victim, no crime." I mean, that would probably release at least half of the people incarcerated right now. I mean, the drug war was really started by Nixon as a way to get at his liberal enemies. It's like, oh, what do all these people have in common? I know, drugs. We can throw them all in prison with the drug war. So I would like to see the drug war end. If through proper education and treatment options and harm reduction, that's the right way to be spending the money when it comes to people, behaving inappropriately with overconsuming substances. So, the amount of talent that's locked up in our incarceration system is just incredible. The greatest resource we have is the human resource, the human resource of talent, and there are just so many people that are just having their lives thrown away, in the prison system. Now, some people do really need to be locked up. I mean, there are some seriously bad people. I'm not for letting them out, but this is a age-old question. Is like, how many innocent people should be locked up in order to keep a guilty person, from doing more harm? And so I think Ben Franklin put that number at 100. So I think some Greek philosophers said you should never lock up any innocent people, no matter. So somewhere in between there's a happy medium that needs to be calibrated. But we've definitely erred on the side of locking up too many innocent people to get at the guilty ones. So great question, and something I intend to emphasize.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 12 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think that one of the key problems is that the privatization of prisons. There's a lot of money to be made locking people up. And so maybe one answer to that is to incentivize churn, to incentivize people, these private prisons, to actually rehabilitate people or get them on the streets sooner, actually make test and measure certain ways to get these people rehabilitated, treat them, and get them back out on the streets in a positive way, especially the victimless criminals. I mean, we need to, again, as Dan was saying, we've got to only lock up the people that are a danger to themselves and others, the violent criminals, the white collar criminals that steal everybody's money. These things need to be punished. They need to be, there's not a lot of rehabilitation for these types of people, but we also have to understand a lot of these people are suffering from a mental illness. There's a lot of stories of people that are in prison that don't want to get out because they know they will go back doing the same thing. And so it's very important to get the violent criminals out there and treat them as you can. But it's also important to let the victimless criminals get out right away. And again, maybe one of the solutions would be to give tax incentives or some sort of monetary incentive for private prisons to rehabilitate, to churn, to get people in and out the door. And that shouldn't increase the number of people they're bringing in, but there should be an incentive in place to where these people showing that they're actually being rehabilitated while in that facility. Right now, it's just a big warehouse of people, and they're making a lot of money, on these people. There's a lot of money to be made with somebody who has a life sentence than they would if they were, if there was capital punishment involved. And so there's a lot of solutions to this, but money talks. It's just like with New Mexico recently having tax within the last few years, having tax incentives. It's becoming the new Hollywood. There's all kinds of studios going up there, and that's where things change, is when you have private companies that have tax incentives and other monetary incentives to change.
Thank you, Candidate Ross, and we will add 41 seconds to your future speaking slots. And Now I would invite Zach Varkaris to ask the next question.
Yeah. Okay. The Republican Party was founded on, abolition of slavery. What it is now is different. Things change. Sentient rights was brought up as advocacy, which is interesting because at the moment we don't think of rights for anything but human rights. And we talk about animal rights, perhaps. But with our progress of technology and health, one of the main stumbling issues is the institutions that we've developed over the last couple of 100 years. So my question is, what is the written policy and procedure you have in place to minimize the detrimental effect of big pharma / FDA in the genuine progress of stem cell procedure for healing processes and procedures?
Thank you, Zach, for your question. And candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
That's a really important question, Zach. I don't have a written policy procedure at this time on that, but I do have a policy conceptual framework that I think could be used. I would look at what has brought about these monopolies in the medical healthcare delivery system, and I would possibly propose a kind of compensation dividend where they've been granted unfair monopoly powers. They could make arrangements for compensation when that's happened. There's something in economics called negative externalities, and it's where you kind of make the profits capitalist, but the losses are socialized, and that's done in so many sectors of the economy and in society. I really think we need these, ongoing truth and reconciliation type commissions to look at past abuses and, basically not all reparations have to be monetary. Sometimes just an apology is enough, but I would expand the citizen science kind of do-it-yourself medical healthcare options. I think we haven't unleashed the power of voluntary, curious people doing distributed work, across many platforms. We have the CRISPR technology, which think for like under $1,000, you can start doing DNA-based research, and this could also get out of hand if people start, resurrecting deadly plague type biological agents. But I think people should be allowed to experiment on themselves. As was mentioned earlier, why are we denying experimental treatments to people with terminal illnesses? This is totally wrong-headed to do that. And I think by making more of this healthcare information open source, when people agree to have it be so, that would be a huge quantum leap in healthcare research. I think we've had episodes of the Salon where we talked about that. So I hope that answered the question, Zach. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, candidate Tweed. We will add 5 seconds to your future speaking times. And candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Yeah, can I have Zach repeat the question? I want to make sure I got that right to give a proper answer.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. What is your written policy stroke procedure, or an overview, a précis of your policy procedure you would have in place to minimize the detrimental effect of big pharma / FDA in the genuine progress of stem cell procedures for healing with a view to life extension? I mean, you brought up some things earlier about sentient rights advocacy, so that's another story. But they're similar in the sense of that, what we call in our organization Freudenspanne, the joy span of life. So
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the question is: what do you have in place, the actual structure of how you're going to make it happen?
Yeah, well, I think what's important is in all of these things, if it's talking about stem cell research and why there's been a hold on that, and certain presidents and administrations have stopped that, is we need to look at the 14th Amendment, which says that anybody who is born has the rights of being a U.S. citizen, and so that's also for the abortion issue. If we're going to be constitutional, if we're going to be semantic about gun rights, then we should be semantic about abortion rights and look at the Constitution. And it says very specifically in its first sentence that if you're born, you have these rights. Okay, now that's again semantic issue, and there's a lot of issues when it comes to abortion. But I think stem cell research should continue, and it should not be controlled only by the FDA. There's a lot of issues with the FDA that I haven't been keeping up with, but I know a few of our officers are very familiar with this. And so, but really, the only policy I've written so far is about sentient rights. And as the director of sentient rights advocacy, that's one of my roles, one of my goals. And but it's really when it comes to AI sentient rights, I think, and I don't want to get too far off your topic here because it's a very important one. But it's something that I don't have a lot of knowledge about, unlike a Dan or other people here. So I don't want to take it too far off the path. But when it comes to sentient rights, I think it's important to grant AI sentient rights, even if it never achieves sentience, if it never achieves some consciousness. It's important because it will, if you give it legal rights, human rights, it will keep human beings from mistreating it, right? It will keep other human nefarious developers from mistreating it or programming it to harm other humans. And so I think there's a correlation there when it comes to thinking about the rights of independent doctors and researchers to work with stem cells. It's a constitutional issue.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And we will add 60 seconds to your future speaking slots. And our next question comes from Liz Parrish, and she asks, what can we do to ensure that young Americans can afford housing? Candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, that's something that, great question, Liz. I really think that's a kind of neglected humane right, is that, our house is really the planet Gaia, this biosphere is our collective house. But we have allowed these distortions of society and economics to create monopolies. As I said before, the geoist idea of location value fees that go into the funding for needed governance functions. I think we could pay for all of government with just a fee for location tax, and it wouldn't displace anyone. It wouldn't need violence. But I really think everyone should be entitled to minimum shelter. I think we had a salon with Charles Hopsopple. He has the 222 movement, which guarantees food, water, and shelter as a humane right to everyone on Earth. I like the idea of a nomadic modular shelter, something perhaps based on the buckyball that looks like a soccer ball that you could construct. It's the world's strongest geometric shape, actually, molecular wise. But if you built a big one that was big enough to string hammocks in and have integrated food production, I think everyone on Earth should really have this kind of Bucky Fuller style, minimum viable livingry unit. Livingry as opposed to weaponry, which was a Bucky Fuller term that's instead of weaponry being death-oriented technology, livingry is the kind of technology that we need to do to promote life and flourishing abundance, which I think is a great goal that the Transhumanist Party uses. I think there is various designs for shelters that could even be nomadic and produced very, very cheaply. And actually for this seasteading project, I think these shelters can be amphibious as well, and built out of kind of upcycled or cheap off-the-shelf technologies and parts. And that's why I love the maker movement. Very active with the local maker group here in the Conejo Valley. And yeah, everyone should have access to minimum shelter, and there should be safe, dignified places to put them in with access to collective things like kitchens and bath facilities and laundry and whatnot. Kind of the dignity parking lot idea that some cities have for people that are living in their vehicles.
Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will subtract 10 seconds from your future speaking times. And now, Candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I think I had an opportunity to travel to Dhaka, Bangladesh, a couple of weeks ago, and I was there with Sharif, who is our Director of Foreign Relations, I believe, and he has projects where he is creating these types of smart, sustainable housing, and they're going higher. They're like 10 to 20 story high rises that he's working on because Dhaka is, I think it's a microcosm, or it's an example of what the whole world is going to have to deal with in the next 100 years. It's overcrowded, and they need to come up. There's a lot of people there, and they need to, attend to this population. They need to go higher rather than out. There's a lot of opportunity there for, and what I saw, it was a real opportunity for a transhumanist village. There's a lot of land there that he has and that the central bank has, and they're doing some interesting projects, but to where we could get the right type of transhumanist investors there and create a whole transhumanist village to test and measure all kinds of things, from AI augmented governing to social services that we come up with, and how to house young people specifically. And I love the idea of the geodesic dome, Bucky Fuller stuff. That's again the strongest structure, and it makes sense, and it'd be cool to see a whole village of those things. But I think it's a real opportunity, and if it's not in Bangladesh or if it's not in Dhaka, we need to start thinking this way. I think we're going to have to do this anyway, and I think younger people don't want big houses. They don't want any more. It's not really a concern of theirs. So they're becoming sleek. They're becoming minimalist in a way. And so it would make sense, and we're going to need to do that anyway. It's not just for young people who can't afford housing, but for the homeless situation in so many cities. And it's all about dignity, as Dan said. It's about and dignity comes because nobody cares to have a high status symbol. You can have dignity and not have a big house or a fancy car. And so there's also opportunities for other types of alternative housing. I read an article a couple of years ago. I think it's a place in Mexico. Those big cement tubes that they use for irrigation underneath the ground, when they're building something. There's a whole village of these tubes that are kind of stacked on each other, 2 stories high. And in that tube, which is maybe, 400 feet wide and however long, and they turn it into a hotel. So there's all kinds of ways to reuse what we already have available to us, whether it's a geodesic dome or if it's a cement tube. There's a lot of opportunities to reuse what we already have out there. And so I think that's one way to do it. I think we're going to see younger people moving in that direction anyway. There's a kind of a commune, a refurbishing of this whole commune idea coming about with, where you're self-sustained gardens and just people living off the land. We're going to see, I think, more of that happening because it has to happen. And so that's one way that the transhumanists can do is maybe do a test and measure village where we're testing out all these different options to do that. So that's one way that we can help.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will subtract 30 seconds from your future speaking times. And there are 3 questions that I would like to get to during the remainder of this roundtable. So let's see how well we can do on that. The first question will go to Brent Ellman.
Thank you. Great discussions. So some of the discussions that we have had in the past about this 2024 USTP presidential election have kind of focused on the idea that this would be seen as a victory internally if we're able to help redefine the way that the masses and the mainstream view transhumanism in general and the pre-held beliefs that they have about our movement. Zoltan Istvan, he had his immortality bus. Last presidential election, there were discussions about things related to this type of an effort. I was just wondering if there were any ideas that either of you have that, maybe things especially that are cost effective that we might be able to put some energy towards to help us meet this goal.
Thank you, Brent. And candidate Tweed, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Brent. When I was doing college radio back in the 90s, I had a radio show called Radio Free Hemp, and it ran for 7 years. And I had on people from every aspect of the industrial and the medicinal and recreational hemp movement. And, Jack Herrera, who wrote the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, he said, cannabis hemp could save the world, end the greenhouse effect. It's the longest, strongest vegetable kingdom element for, food, fiber, fuel, medicine. And really, I think he wasn't wrong. It grows everywhere from the Arctic Circle to the equator. You could get 10,000 different products made from the feedstocks of hemp. Henry Ford was actually going to, as he boasted, grow cars from the ground, and he was going to fuel them with vegetable oils, the seed oils that hemp can make. So, we really saw that whole hemp revolution be quashed by big petro interests, chemical interests. I think it was DuPont had just invented nylon, and they suppressed the automation of the hemp processing industry. There had been an automated way to process the fibers from hemp, but it's not too late. I mean, it's not just hemp. There's kelp, there's bamboo, there's lots of vegetable feedstocks that we're not using to create, immense wealth. We don't have to give everyone an electric car. We could move these buckyball shelters around with drones and zip lines, and there is enough to go around if we just intelligently deploy the resources, the technology. And I would be asking these questions of AI systems as well. I think we're going to get a lot of surprising, answers that we didn't think of by leveraging the power of ubiquitous AI, which now seems to be threatening to dislocate about 50% of our jobs in 5 years. So I kind of wandered off the original question maybe there. But I think, just look at these regenerative resources like hemp. I don't know why that came to mind as a big answer, but I've always been, a cannabist, you could say, or a hempist, because it's one of those neglected solutions that is just right in front of us, and we just need to pick it up and use it.
Thank you, candidate Tweed. We will add 11 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Well, we know that social media and corporate media, they live off of engagement. The ratings and the revenue are pumped up when they can get people to be angry and to engage more on social media or in the public. That's their business model. And so as transhumanists, we have a real opportunity to have a low-cost publicity stunt just by saying what we are, just doing what we are. And I think the idea of even having these roundtables instead of debates to run as a group, all of these things, even having an AI campaign manager, when everybody's afraid of AI right now because it's the global conversation, to have an AI advisors and AI campaign manager, that should cause some engagement. That should get us some attention. It's kind of a publicity stunt in a way, but it's also, I've been saying this since I joined the party, we need to engage with these conspiracy theorists. I've been on a few radio shows and podcasts of people who think that transhumanism has this dark agenda. And I've been able to turn a couple of them around and diffuse what they think. And then they just go on to some other conspiracy because they need a conspiracy. Otherwise, they don't make money with their engagement. And so I think that's one low cost way to do it, is just be out and proud with what we are. But also take back the narrative that's gotten away from us. Most people, when you think of transhumanists, oh, I heard about that. They have this dark agenda. They're an advanced team for the Antichrist or whatever it is, And I keep making the point of, no, there's as many transhumanist types as there are people that identify as such, whether you come into it like I did to fight child exploitation, or you've come into it because you want to upload your brain to a hard drive and live forever, or you want longevity, you want to live longer and enhance your quality of life. There's so many reasons to be part of this. And the best part about it is, again, like, I don't know what most of my fellow officers, who they voted for in the last election, and I don't want to know. And because we don't talk about that stuff, I've got answers prepared for these wedge issues like gun control or abortion and things like that, which we touched on a little earlier. But it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to us. Those are ways to divide and conquer people. It's a very, both of those issues, they're not going to be solved unless unless we let go of the denial that they're real, right? And we have to respect both sides. So there's a lot of ways that we can solve those things just in a transpartisan way. But ultimately, we have kind of a built-in publicity stunt by just being out and proud about what we believe. And that's the tact I've been taking for a couple of years now, is I've been labeled by the Ascension crowd as an AI prophet, which I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I like that. I was flattered. And then I read in the Ascension glossary what they meant by that. And now I'm honored, frankly. It's kind of a dark thing, but I've taken on that attitude, and because this is the stuff I honestly believe. And so by just being out and proud about who we are, it's got built-in engagement right there. And so that's one way to get the attention of the media, is to not shy away from what we honestly believe. And that will increase engagement, and that will increase their ratings and their revenue.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will subtract 28 seconds from your future speaking slots. And our next question comes from our friend John H. And I think this question would be suitable for a shorter response, since it's a very straightforward question. So I will give a minute for each candidate to respond to this. John wonders, what are the candidates' views on the death penalty? Candidate Tweed, please begin.
Well, life is precious, and no one is beyond redemption. But I think if the death penalty is administered in the first person by someone trying to stay alive, who's been threatened by someone trying to end their life, that would be an instance of the death penalty that I could support. I don't think there are other instances that I would support the death penalty for. I hope that's a short and sweet answer.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Candidate Tweed. We will add 25 seconds to your future speaking times. And now, Candidate Ross, please proceed. You have a minute.
My view is that I wouldn't want to give the state that ability. I don't want to give some third party the ability. If somebody harms my family or kills one of my family members, one of my loved ones, I will take care of that myself. I don't want to give the state that responsibility, because they could be killing an innocent person. And so it's really up to the individual. So I'm against it, as far as I don't want to give the state that power, because they can be wrong. Our judicial system's really well set up to help, innocent people, but sometimes that doesn't work. And so I'm against the state having that power, but I would take care of it myself.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. We will add 20 seconds to your future speaking times. And our next question is going to be the final question before closing remarks. I will point out there are other questions within the chat on YouTube, as well as our internal chat. So I would encourage the candidates to address those questions in writing subsequent to the roundtable, and we will publish their answers so that as many of the viewer questions as possible are addressed. But for our final question, we will pose the inquiry from David Shoemaker, who asks, please discuss what should be the main focus of education in the 21st century. I am going to give 3 minutes to each candidate for that question. And candidate Twedt, please begin.
You know, one of my favorite educational experiences is in a hobby that both David and I are members of, and that's amateur radio, which I have the extra class call sign KK6 VDR. But, you know, amateur radio is kind of the most transhuman hobby there is. I mean, it's worldwide. It emphasizes freedom of communication, freedom of association, freedom of thought. The mentoring system found in amateur radio with people called Elmers is the slang term for people that help newbies to the hobby, I think is just such a great model. The other thing that we really need to emphasize in education is wisdom is more important than knowledge. I mean, we are deluged with more knowledge than we know what to do with. But wisdom, not so much. We really need to up the wisdom component of the education game, and I think that's going to come about from intergenerational mentoring relationships. It's going to come about from citizen science, things like the maker movement, which is very amateur radio friendly as well. You know, I think what intelligence seems to want to do is reach out into the universe and find other intelligences and communicate with them. That's like the best way to educate yourself, someone once said, is to meet and communicate with as many new people as possible. Kind of a mission statement of amateur radio there, almost. So yeah, education is not something that happens just in brick and mortar situations. It's a lifelong thing, and it should be a living thing, and it should be the most enjoyable, one of the most enjoyable things you do with your life and times. So yeah, I think we are the USTP, this party. We are the education party, and we should claim that idea and that title. But thanks for the question, Dave, and 73, as they say in amateur radio.
Thank you, candidate Tweed. We will add 30 seconds to your future speaking slots. And now, candidate Ross, you have 3 minutes.
Well, it's AI again. An AI can customize curriculum when it learns its companion. It can learn. It can through a series of processes. It can hone in on the natural skills and proclivities of their human. And I've been saying for a while that it's really important for people entering the workforce to have an AI companion, because it can give you, again, extend educational opportunities. It can tell you where to network. It can give you the latest news on the field that you are entering. And so, and I think that we're going to see more of this. And so what AI can do is really customize a whole curriculum. And so we're not just standardized. We're not like, this whole educational system we have here in the US was built for the industrial age. We have one teacher, one manager. We're all sitting in a row. We're being prepared to work on an assembly line. And that's got to be an entropy. That's got to change. And now with AI, we don't have to have standardized testing. We can have an AI that will learn it's human, that can really customize a curriculum that really enhances their core capacities. And so I'm hoping we're going to see more of that. I'm pushing for that. And it's the best way that AI can augment us. And we're seeing that now with ChatGPT 4 and before. There's a lot of professors that are complaining that they're getting papers turned in, and they can't tell if it's by the student or by ChatGPT. And what that tells me is that we just need to rethink how we're training these students. We don't need to anymore memorize dates, and we don't need to understand how to properly structure a thesis paper. What we need to do is hone in on the human skill sets that cannot be coded or automated, and there's still a few of them. And what that is, it's original thought. And we're seeing this happen now. Everything's happened so quickly in the last couple of months with all this AI generative art, and I think that is putting a premium on human generative art. We're seeing that now that people can write full, plans and papers and stories with ChatGPT, but it requires, like I was saying earlier with the pathologist, it requires that human touch. It requires that human to put some either humor into it or just put some human quality into it to make it even more impactful. And so I think with it, as far as education, we're gonna need to stop being afraid of AI, but also incorporate it into how we are training our students and letting it customize curriculum for each of them.
Thank you, Candidate Ross. And we will carry over 6 seconds for you. Now, the time has come for our closing remarks, and we do have a significant edge for Candidate Tweed over Candidate Ross. That edge is by 294 accumulated seconds, but unfortunately we don't have that time in our broadcast. We have essentially 3 minutes. So I'm going to give 2 minutes to Candidate Tweed and then 1 minute to Candidate Ross, and we will address the balance in a later forum. So Candidate Tweed, you have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
One of the most influential books I remember being exposed to as a young person was Stuart Brand's series of Whole Earth catalogs. And I love the phrase on the back cover. It said, "We are as gods and might as well get good at it." And, inside the pages of the Whole Earth catalog, I was introduced to Bucky Fuller mainly. I mean, if I would just say, this guy, he was the planet's friendly genius, our Buckminster Fuller. If we just implemented, a tenth of his design science anticipatory philosophies, I think we could solve or have a good suite of solutions for most of the current challenges that humanity is facing. I've always felt like this was a great time to be alive. When I was born in 1960, there were 3 billion people on the planet. Now it's nearly tripled here in 2023. But what an amazing time to be alive. And I hope we can spread that sense of amazement to everyone. And something I want to really advocate for is developing a universal language. We have had attempts at this in the past. Esperanto has kind of been a quasi good attempt at it. But I know Art Ramon is done some work on a universal sign language, which doesn't exist yet. But we could make this a project for the the Transhumanist Party to do that. The main reason I got involved in public service advocacy is governments are not addressing the existential threats that face us. So I think the Lifeboat Foundation is doing a great job at that. I found out about them and joined them very early on, I think back in like 2008, but they're an amazing group. And anyway, I'm probably used up my 2 minutes, but blessings upon you all, and go in flourishing abundance and peace. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Candidate Tweed. And now for Candidate Ross, can you fit your closing remarks in 30 seconds?
Let's see. Well, just pick up on what Daniel was saying. I'm a big fan of Bucky Fuller, and I think the idea of a trim tab, the trim tab is that small little rudder on a bigger rudder, and that's what we need to focus on. Every human being can turn a big rudder, which could turn an ocean liner. And so we need to understand the power that we have. And when it comes to this universal language, I think we're seeing it evolve with these young people, with these emojis and these memes. There's a whole new Tower of Babel building language that is emerging. And so that's all I have to say about that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Candidate Ross, for your closing remarks, and Candidate Tweed for your astute comments as well throughout the course of this roundtable. We got to a total of 14 audience questions today. That was more than I was anticipating. So I really appreciate all of the engagement. We will hopefully get the candidates to respond to the remaining audience questions in writing. And then later this month, we are going to have a 7-day electronic voting period for all of our US Transhumanist Party members. If you would like to vote to select our 2024 presidential nominee, please join us for free at transhumanist-party.org/membership prior to the voting period to make sure you get a ballot. Thank you to our candidates. Thank you to our roundtable attendees. And I hope that you all live long and prosper.